Hey everybody, and welcome back to Josh Lioce's video blog. Today we have special guest and sponsor, attorney Arielle Cecala from Crowley & Cummings. Today we're talking about seller's disclosure or disclosure in a real estate transaction and what you need to know about it. So stay right here, we'll be right back. All right, welcome back. So I'd like to welcome attorney Arielle Cecala to the show.
Hey Josh, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you as always for being here and giving us your insight and information on important topics. So today I want to bring some information to our viewers in the community about disclosure. It's been coming up a lot more recently, and I said, I want to get Arielle on and see what she has to say. So kind of just give, I guess, a background, broad definition of disclosure in a real estate transaction.
Absolutely. So when we think about disclosure, it's, what does the seller know about the property that they have a legal obligation to tell somebody about the property. And typically if you're going seller to buyer, it's what does the seller have to tell the buyer? And what I always tell my clients is in Massachusetts, the seller has no legal obligation to disclose anything to the buyer except for the known presence of lead paint, which is distinguished by a seller being asked a question. So if a seller's asked a question, they have to answer it truthfully to the best of their knowledge.
All right. So obviously real estate agents have seller's disclosures and they're always asking sellers to fill them out. Now I know attorneys probably feel differently. So if a seller is going to ask you a question about this seller's disclosure, what is your advice to them and what is your advice to realtors out there?
Absolutely. So what I just mentioned is, once a seller comes to you as a real estate agent and says, hey Josh, just so you know, the sewer pipe outside the house has this huge issue, and they come to you and they disclose something to you that is a material piece of information about the property that the buyer would be interested in knowing about, that now when you have that information, your obligations for disclosure are different than the seller's. So when you sit down with a seller and have them fill out a seller disclosure, it is actually usually a very helpful piece of information because it allows the seller to give you the information they have about the property, which can then be shared about the buyer. So the seller's being as upfront with the buyer as they can be. And I think a lot of times it ends up helping with liability in the end because they've stated in the seller disclosure to the best of their knowledge the various operations of systems within the property.
So around the same thing as disclosure, where can a seller get in trouble with a warranty or representation around the property?
Yeah, so they just want to, a seller just wants to be careful that, if they have the information, they shared the information with you, they know that this information is true. Especially if they're already engaged in the real estate transaction with the buyer, they then can't hide that information from the buyer or from the buyer's agent in the case where you have that information. So I think if they're going to make the effort to make disclosures about the property, they have to be really careful to be truthful about them and make sure that they're being thorough and truthful with that disclosure.
Okay, last question. The one that I get most often from consumers or from just people in general is, hey, do you have to disclose if there was a murder at your house?
So you do not have to disclose if there's a murder in your house or if maybe one night you thought you saw a ghost. Again, that's not something the seller doesn't have any obligation to offer up that information. But if I'm on the buyer side and this is something that, hey, I don't want to buy a house with a ghost in it. I don't want to buy a house where somebody's committed suicide or some tragic event has happened. If that buyer comes to you or that buyer's agent comes to you or the seller and says, hey, has anybody ever been killed in this property? You have to answer them truthfully to the best of your knowledge. The internet is a powerful thing these days. So if you don't tell them, Google probably will.
Yes, they will. Yes, they will. Well, as always, awesome knowledge. And thank you so much for coming on the show today.
You're very welcome. It's always a pleasure.
And if you guys have any questions or want to learn more about disclosure, you can always reach out to attorney Cecala. Her information is beginning and at the end of the show as our sponsor. She's one of the best. We use her exclusively. So reach out and certainly reach out to me if you have any questions or if I can help you in any way. As always, thanks for watching Josh Lioce's video blog, and we'll see you next time.